Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome back Peter Robinson and Arturo Mari.
You all have, I can hear myself twice, which is at least once too often. You all have headsets, I hope. If you'd like to listen in English, turn the headset to channel 1. If you'd like to listen in Italian, actually, if you'd like to listen to it in Italian, just take the headset off. Arturo will be speaking Italian. Arturo Mari was introduced to John Paul II when he was a priest, not even a bishop, when John Paul II was a priest at the Second Vatican Council. Arturo was his photographer throughout his papacy. For that matter, Arturo Mari served as photographer to Pius XII, John XXIII, Paul VI, John Paul I, John Paul II, and Benedict XVI, before retiring in 2007. How can it be that this man was a photographer beginning with Pius XII, and yet, as you can see, he's not 200 years old? Arturo began at the age of 16. Arturo, welcome. Bienvenido, although that's Spanish rather than Italian. Tell us about the young man you met during the Second Vatican Council, the young Pole. How were you introduced to him, and what impression did he make on you?
First of all, I would like to thank you for the invitation. It is an honor to be here in front of you all. The only thing that I would like to point out when I tell some of the issues, my voice can go down a little bit. It's just because as I tell you these things, I relive them, and these are very moving moments, and so I thank you. 1962. Ecumenical Council number 2, Vatican Council 2. I had the good fortune to meet Monsignor Karol Wojtyla. To be exact, Cardinal Wyszynski introduced him to me, who was the primate of Poland. And here a friendship starts, and it lasted until 2004. This friendship, I started this friendship because I was very curious to know what this Iron Curtain was. This country that was beautiful, communist. I am Roman, from Rome. I was born in Rome under St. Peter's Basilica, close to the St. Peter's Basilica. I was passionate about this, and so this is what started my friendship with Monsignor Wojtyla. And even in this, he was a man, and then he was the priest. He was very precise, very delicate, but very firm. So we went on throughout the years until the day in which, on October 16, 1978, when the door of the Sistine Chapel opened after the conclave, and he was right in front of me, dressed in white. The emotion was incredible. But the best thing was the gesture that he did toward me. He looks at me and he does that. Look at me. He was a very simple person. my history with him, you have to keep in mind that he kept me like a son, and I considered him my father. And so we have started a pontificate, a huge pontificate. The most beautiful thing that I will tell you about is not so much the life in the Vatican, which is, yes, interesting. The Pope, the hearings, the audiences, the heads of states, like your President Reagan. At this point, I would like to say that the Holy Father had a very good start with President Reagan, a man of a deep culture, a simple man, but his culture was incredible and his will was very strong. And then that affection relationship explodes, collaboration. I want to use this word collaboration because the Holy Father and President Reagan and President Gorbachev, the Holy Father made it so that he had a group of men, of persons who loved liberty and peace. And really they worked a lot until the moment, until the day, the beautiful day, and I refer to the fall of the Berlin Wall. It was no longer President Reagan, but it was George Bush, the father, senior, who was very affectionate. He loved the Pope, and this affection happens in the confidences of President Reagan. And George Bush, with his humility, also enacted them. And they were two persons who have continued to guide the world in peace and freedom.
How did the Pope respond? How did the Pope respond when he learned that the Berlin Wall had fallen?
Only in one way. He retired in the chapel where there's still a picture of the Madonna of Shestokova, and he stayed there for a long time in prayer, hours in prayer. This was only the way to thank, as he thanked for people. He just prayed and had people in their heart. This was the reality. At this point, I would like to show in various situations the humility of John Paul II, his charity, his piety. There are some things that not even I thought that they could happen. This is one of the many that stays in my heart. I am referring to the trip to Zaire in Congo, Kinshasa, the capital. This morning, the Holy Father had the official visit at the most important hospital of Kinshasa. So we arrived at the hospital. I want to point out that we are talking about Africa. We arrived. He goes into the first department. He takes his red mantle off, and as a simple priest, he goes toward the first bed. There was a kid, a child who was about 3 years old, and he was all curled up. We didn't even know if he was alive or not. He started to caress him, look at him, and the parents of this kid come, and obviously they're not Catholic or non-Catholic. It doesn't even exist. There is the humanity, the respect of life. And the parents are talking with the Pope, and he was there for a long time. He comforted them and gave a financial help also. And then he goes to the second bed, and here the story is a little bit stronger. There was a child who was about 1.5 years old, and you can only see a head, a huge belly, and let's say the legs, if you want to call them that way. And the Holy Father touches him, and he didn't give any sign of life. So just like a father, he picks him up in his arms. He gets a handkerchief because his face was a little bit dirty. There were some flies. He cleans him and puts his handkerchief away and just does like that. He rocks him a little bit in his arms. And he starts to sing a lullaby. And simultaneously, with his index finger, he starts to tickle his chin and mouth, and after a minute or so, there are the first symptoms. This little child opens his eyes, and he had huge eyes, beautiful eyes, black eyes. And he starts to look at him, and the Holy Father kept him tickling him, and he takes shows his tongue. He is hungry, and the mother comes near, and she saw this scene, and she starts hugging the Pope. And she starts crying hysterically. She is seeing her child who is smiling in the Pope's arms, and so he hugs her and starts talking with her, and her husband comes also, who obviously goes to his wife and starts crying, and are comforted by the Pope. But the most beautiful thing is that from under the bed there are another 5 children who are the brothers of this child, and they are seeing that their little brother, who was very ill, is starting to smile, and so they're just playing with the Pope. They're pulling this and that. Obviously, his vestment was no longer white, as you can imagine, and these were beautiful, beautiful moments. And the Holy Father, he also gave a huge help. He left this situation, and the scene was wonderful. It was very human. These are live people. And we went on in this department. We end the visit, and we are exiting. And this is a beautiful moment. I could never imagine. We arrive at the door. I was used to looking at him in his eyes. He spoke with his eyes. What is happening? I'm wondering. He turns toward his left, and there were two nuns, nurses, with a brown, they were dressed in brown, and they're all wet, all dirty. The Pope looks at them, and serenely he looks at them and goes to them and kneels in front of them, takes their hands, kisses them, and says, "In the name of God, I bless you. Thank you, thank you." This was John Paul II. Thank you.
Questioni tecniche.
Technical stuff.
Arturo, what did the Pope say to your wife?
Actually, it's the first time that somebody asks me this question. My wife met the Holy Father 3 times. He spoke with her 3 times. And we have a son who is a priest. And the most beautiful thing that I don't know what the Holy Father told my wife. For 3 times I asked her, what happened? It's not your problem, she says. That is the answer that I can give you. I say this because you have to know that my life with him started at 6:20 in the morning. I entered in his apartment because the first ceremony was at 7 o'clock with the mass, and then it continued with the audiences. Normally, I arrived I worked until about 8:30, 9 o'clock at night, 10. And when with Reagan, when we were working for many things, I was staying there even until midnight or 3 o'clock in the morning, all in one swoop. So what he said to my wife, I don't know. Her answer is, it's not your business. It's not your problem. And the third thing I should say, that I am lucky that I have such a wife who endured me for all these years. She is from South America. She has a different perspective of life. She's very Catholic. We have a son who is a priest, as I said, and I thank God of all this. Thank you.
Sorry. Questo vuol dire tanto.
Arturo, you knew a saint. You have a son who's a priest. Do you mind if when I get to the pearly gates, I just say, look, I knew Arturo? That's how I'm going to get to heaven. We have only a couple of minutes left. What? You knew him well. Now we have a generation coming up that cannot even remember him. Anyone under the age of, in their teens simply has no memory of him. What do we need to grasp? If you can bring it down to a few sentences, what do we need to hold on to about this man?
I think that we can remember. The truth is, he was a saint during his life because what I witnessed, even at a distance, you think that it's not possible. It's hard to explain. He was a saint during his life. I would like to remember him always as the man of humility, of charity, and of piety. And I would like to remember him. You all know that the Holy Father wrote 14 encyclica, and you know what the encyclicas are. They are the official laws of the Pope, which he issues. I say that he did not only do these 14 encyclicas, he made 15, and the 15th, I called it encyclica of suffering, because it was an incredible teaching in his humility. We saw him suffer as he did. You know how many times during the audiences there were people, and people were waiting for him. He couldn't say no. And I would say, be strong, and he looked at me with his smile, but you could see his suffering. And this should be a warning for everybody. Understand what the suffering is. This is all I can say about remembering him.
No applause for 1 second. I want you to know that Arturo has authored a book on his time with the Pope called See You in Paradise, published in 2007. If you're like me, your next move is going to be to go to Amazon and order Arturo's book. Ladies and gentlemen, Arturo Mari. Mille grazie.